This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Hi, welcome to the Living It Out podcast, a weekly podcast to remind you that you matter and help you live out that truth throughout the week. My name is Ben Bacher. I'm here with Marna Ward. How are you doing today, Marna?
Good. It's so nice to be back. I was gone last week, so I'm just so glad to have an opportunity to talk about this past weekend's message.
Yes, this weekend Andy talked, and he talked about something that I was pretty excited about. He talked about the World Series in 2016 when the Chicago Cubs beat the Cleveland Indians. So I was pumped.
You guys in this 2016 World Series, I feel like is it that epic? Like in the historical of World Series, is it an epic World Series, or is it just because we live right in between these two teams?
Well, it's epic for sure, because I think the Cubs had not won a World Series since 1906.
Yeah,
I
I
know they
think
hadn't
okay.
been to one since 1908. It could be off a
Yeah,
couple
it was the
years, which is
curse, right? It was like the whole thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
curse of the goat. So they broke the curse, which was huge. And then the Indians hadn't been there for a many number of years as well, maybe like 50 years or so that they hadn't. So they still haven't won the World Series. So that was
Spoken
huge.
like a true Cubs fan.
Right. Well, it's funny is like I had just come, I was on staff, I've been on staff for a long time, but I left for a little while. I came back, and when I came back, it was right around that time that the Cubs and the
Yes.
Indians were in the World Series. So like Snyder had us over to his house for Game 7.
Oh.
Ben Snyder, who's an Indians fan, Casey
Mhm.
Greenwald, who hosts the Living Out podcast often, was also there as an Indian fan. And then my brother and I were the Cubs fans, and it was just like Game 7. Cubs
Oh,
jumped out on top, Indians came back, and then the Cubs won it in extra innings after a rain
incredible.
delay. So,
Yes. Yeah, I
um,
love it.
so I know you worked with Andy during that whole time, so he
I
was,
did. Yeah, we were teammates during that time, and I mean, I really never cared about baseball. I still don't, just for the record, but if I haven't had a chance to share it here, this is the weird thing for me is I don't really like sports, but I love sports radio. So I will listen to sports radio and I know what's happening in sports, but I don't really care about the teams. I don't care
right,
who wins or loses. Like I just love the banter of there's probably some deep psychological thing happening. I don't know,
you just
but
like hearing them talk about it.
I
Well, they
just
talk
like
about it.
hearing.
There's a lot of like cultural things that come up in the
Yes,
sports talk radio,
that's
and
what I think so too. I think so too. Thank you for supporting my sports radio listing. And but Andy was such a big Indians fan, and of course, dressed head to toe throughout that whole thing. And so I felt like I better keep up, like more so than the next morning. I needed to know what was happening, and it was just kind of a fun season because everybody was so excited that followed those teams, and I think just for whatever reason, maybe it is because where we live and there were more fans that were here and that cared. I just remember it being like we were all following along, to see what was going to happen.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think from my perspective, it was just great to hear somebody talking about sports again because with COVID-19, sports has gone
yeah.
away. There's NASCAR is still going on, golf is coming. I saw some tennis. Things are
Hmm.
starting to potentially come back, but there's a lot of things like football. People are just like, I don't know. Like they're
I
hoping to have a
know.
college football season, but we'll see if that happens. And then of
Hmm.
course, high school sports as well. I've got a great friend who his son is going to be a senior this year in basketball, and he's going to go on to play college, which is a great thing. But
Yeah,
he's been looking forward to his son's senior year
for a
since his
long
son was,
time.
5 or 6 years old.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's heartbreaking to think about. Like you had mentioned, the 2020 class missed a lot, but the 2021 class, we'll see what they missed. But definitely praying for
Yeah.
them and for the
Hmm.
experiences of their senior year, and hopefully some sports will be able to happen. But
Yeah. Yep.
um, so we did talk about more than just sports this weekend, though. Andy delivered a great talk and shared really that God created us to be spiritual sharers. And the
Hmm.
bottom line of his talk was that my purpose is to give spiritual meaning to the mundane. And I think the myth is that he brought up too is the myth is that if something's going to have spiritual meaning, then we would think, oh, it's got to be this mountaintop experience, it's got to be this
Yes.
big deal, and really, it's like, no, things, spiritual things can happen in the smallest moments, in the most mundane moments. And as I thought about that, I was thinking about what are some of the mundane moments that we all experience. What for you? What are just some of the things that you can't stand doing, that just the mundane, dull,
Yeah.
over, things that happen over and over throughout the week or throughout your month?
Yeah, my mind always goes to chores, like around
Yeah.
the house. Like I still actually call them chores because that's like how it feels to me. It's like, okay, got to do the laundry and we have to wash the dishes, which I'm really good about like loading the dishwasher, unloading the dishwasher, but the stuff that doesn't fit in the dishwasher, can we talk about the like most random, like all of a sudden the sink is full of like either stuff that doesn't quite fit right or it's not supposed to go in the dishwasher or whatever it
Right.
is, and now you've got this load of dishes that you're like, okay, it's a little bigger than the drying rack I own, and so just working through some of that. So those were the two that like immediately came to mind when you asked me that question. So how about
Yeah.
you?
I think dishes for sure. Dishes jump out there. It's just like I can't stand just the so I would say that. I like yard work, so I think some people maybe would say yard work.
Yeah.
Um, I think cleaning can be mundane.
Yeah.
So
And
all that
like
stuff.
I always joke about like I don't like to clean things that are supposed to clean things. Like when you have to actually clean the dishwasher or clean the washer or run the wash cycle. I'm like, no, no, you're supposed to wash stuff. Like I
Right.
shouldn't have to.
Yep, that's great. I think beyond that, I think there's just things that we do in our everyday that we'll talk about in a little bit. But like Andy's one example too is like just running in to grab something, running in to grab a coffee. Like you don't think about that as a spiritual moment or an opportunity for spiritual meaning. Like my purpose is to run in and grab coffee. It's
Yeah.
not to anything beyond that. So there's things that we just kind of go through the motions of, okay, I'm going to do this, going to this, and there's an opportunity to connect with God and others in those moments.
Yeah.
Might be meetings. Some of our meetings, I feel like we're going to be mundane. So it might
Sometimes
be
that's
work
how it
experience,
goes.
family experiences. Just all those things are great. But I mean, I love the fact that Andy really talked about how we can make those mundane moments have spiritual meaning, and he used the
Yes.
story of Esther to kind of help equip us with that. Can you talk a little bit about just that story, and then just some of the principles that Andy pulled out of it?
Yeah, I think the book of Esther for me is for first of all, it's kind of a page turner in terms of there is a lot happening in that book. It's not a very long book to read, but it does read kind of like a drama novel of
Right,
just relationships that are happening. And he talked about the attitudes of the king at that time, what was happening with the queen, how Esther got introduced to him, so there's, like layers of what can kind of feel like a soap opera
right,
of its day. But I think one of the great things about Esther is that it really does follow her story that ultimately reflects the story of all of the Jewish people at that time. And so, in some ways, even though she was selected to be queen, which again, we would think is sort of this mountaintop experience, like there's a lot of
right,
mundane uh, a lot of mundane in that. And so the relationship that she had with her uncle, who really was a father figure to her, and the way that he pointed her to God in some of these critical moments, are just a testament to what it looks like to walk in faith every day. And I think that's why Esther was such a compelling story up against this bottom line of she could have just been like, oh, well, what's going to happen is going to happen.
right,
And I think Andy even talked about that. Like, look, God's plan will prevail. So you can either choose to be a part of it or not. And her choice to be a part of it was so pivotal. And he certainly would have accomplished what he needed to accomplish there no matter what. But that's really not the point. I think the point really is the ways that she responded in those moments that honored God, that helped to really save her people. And she was in a unique position to do it in a way that that really shows us so much of what it looks like. Uh, as mountaintop as it can seem, these were flashes of moments in her life, and so that's what I
Right.
just thought is so fascinating about Esther. So as Andy kind of walked through that and just used even just a few of the verses from the book,
Hmm.
really stepping into some of those, um, first having to really look at how are you perceiving a situation, right? Like even
Yeah.
those myths that we talked about earlier. So the first piece is really stepping into like how am I stepping into this situation and what do I see here?
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that perspective and the change of perspective of, I think she had some myths that she was holding on to as far as like, um, it's not my place to go into the room and
yes.
talk to the king. I could be killed. It's not, someone else maybe should do this, or just that
Is
whole
there anyone
perspective.
else,
Yeah, is
please?
anyone else? And I think Mordecai was like, no, this your time, queen.
Yes.
And but that perspective, and I think too, her perspective was on the power of King Xerxes. Like it was on, ooh, what can he do to me versus focusing on the power of who God was, and that God would
Yeah.
be able to use her in that. So I think once her perspective was changed and Mordecai kind of said, hey, there's an opportunity for you to do something really cool and be
Yeah.
used by God, and like make that for your perspective instead of what could go wrong.
Right.
Um, so, and I really, when you think about that whole Cubs and Indians story, that was Andy's point, was like Ben Snyder missed out on that, like he had an opportunity to be there and he missed out. And there's things,
Yes.
so, in a way, Andy was saying, hey, we all have an opportunity to step into any situation and really be used by God. And he does, Andy's like, I don't want you to miss out on that. So,
Yeah.
keep your focus, put those goggles on where you see God working.
I
And
think that is what's fascinating about Esther is you almost the book is almost written as if you're kind of an audience member. You're kind of watching what happens from an outside perspective. We don't always get to glimpse the internal. You see some of it in her conversations with Mordecai and back and forth,
mm,
but it's implied. There's so much that's implied there as to your point, how much courage it took, how that perspective shift changed everything for her, and that to be known that, and I know the line is like, as such a time for this, and there's
mm,
so often I think that we do have those. If we can do the same, I mean, he talked about it. If I'm walking in a Starbucks, you even said it, if I feel like I'm just running errands today, but if it is that as I get in my car, my prayer is, who do you need me to impact today? In what way can I do that? That just starts to change all of those things. Our dishes and laundry example, I'm still searching for a little bit, but those are opportunities I think where he talked about if you change your perspective and really trust what God can do in those spaces, and then
right.
really being able to pray first through it. So my laundry time could be time to really pray and ask him, who do you want me to reach out to? What are the ways that I can do that? Man, don't you think those stories that you hear of people that are doing quote unquote regular jobs, but they do it in this inspired and incredible way, like those bus drivers who are just
Yeah.
a complete ray of sunshine to
Oh my
people, and they
goodness.
bring like, I just think those stories impact us for a reason. Like we go,
There,
wow.
yeah, there's a lady, I wish I knew her name. She's passed, but she was a bus driver in San Francisco. And like everybody knew this woman because she was
Yeah.
just so joyful and would pray for people. And like it was an encouraging experience. Like it was a great experience to go on her bus. And when
Wow.
she passed, like there were just like, it was a huge article in the paper
Outpouring,
about her.
I
People
bet.
came to her funeral, like, and it's like, I'm just driving the bus. Like, people are getting
Right.
on, getting off. Like she took full opportunity there to,
Yeah.
just praise God and like be a light in the community and whoever stepped on her bus. And she
Yeah.
was vocal about that. So I think that's a
Wow.
great example, a great
Yeah.
thought that you had there. Yeah, pray first. And then I think the fourth thing, so it was like change your perspective, trust God, pray first. And then the fourth thing that he talked about really was about like Jesus is king. So like
Yes.
I think he pointed to like Esther was right there with King Xerxes, and it's like, well, yeah, she had an opportunity to do something great, but we
Mhm.
we don't have a king in our life, or we're not living in a palace with an opportunity to like that. But his point was like Jesus is our king, so
Mhm.
there's always an opportunity, right? I
Yes.
thought that was a great point that he had. What is your thought on that one? For
I think see what I loved about, especially the way that Andy kept unpacking that, is he kept reminding us that we're Jesus followers, as Christ followers. Like we belong to the family of God, and there is that belonging and that love and understanding that Jesus is King, and that we get to be a part of what he's doing in the here and now. It
Mhm.
just was such a great reminder, especially like, I mean, I would say we're this crazy upside down time that we live in has really called to the surface of both the mundane and the extraordinary all at once,
Right,
and probably a little bit more of the mundane these days because we've been at this for a few months. There aren't really clear answers. Everybody's feeling like there's not a right way to do anything anymore. And yet, there's a part of me that I really wanted to be able to use this season, and I hear a lot of people do this, to say, okay, what can this be about? There's all sorts of things that we can't do and we can't control, and we don't make the decisions and some of those things. But
right,
I just felt like this whole model was such a great reminder that if I can start my day with Jesus as King, it's almost like it works both forwards and backwards, right? Like if I can
right,
change my perspective, trust God, pray first, and really understand that Jesus is King, it works the same way. Acknowledge that Jesus is King, pray first, trust God, change your perspective. Like no matter how you come into that, I think though that's really the way that we can approach every single day, and really make so much out of it in ways that we might have missed otherwise, both for ourselves, like our own hearts, but also for the people that we have opportunities to interact with or intentionally reach out to. So I I think it's Darius, right? Was
yeah,
the
there is.
story. So
Yep,
Darius talked about this, like, hey, I stepped into a group, the super intentional step, and
I
all
love
of it.
that. He was like,
Oh man,
he was like, Andy invited me to my group, but I thought Paul's group would be
I know.
better. Like, that
It
was
was
great.
perfect because that's how it goes, right? It's
Right.
like, and they kept asking me and kept, and so, but I don't know, I just, there was a part of that and all of this that I was like, this is really what life change looks like. Like,
Right.
this is the adventure that we don't want anybody to miss out on. And I just thought he captured that really well.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I loved it because he works with youth, and he has an opportunity to
yes.
make a difference. And I think he always knew, like, hey, I'm here to make a difference and to help these kids. But now he's got an eternal perspective of like,
Yes.
I don't have just an opportunity to make these kids' life better today and tomorrow, but like for eternity. And I
I
loved hearing
know.
him talk about that for sure.
Yeah,
So.
I agree.
Um, so that's great. I love hearing those principles. I think we've hit on some application and some practical next steps. But do
Mhm.
you have anything like, just like, I know Andy's example was like when you go into the coffee shop, don't just think of it as, hey, I'm going to grab a coffee and then I'm out. But hey, there might be an opportunity for me to encourage that barista or pray for them
Mhm.
or whatever. Were there any other things that jumped out to you like that are just super practical?
Yeah, I was thinking some about that because, let's say that now we're in drive-throughs, or, we're trying not to be close with people for a long time, and I think there's more ways than maybe we recognize. And even for me sometimes, like, I think I've mentioned this before, but even scrolling through social can be a mixed bag. But
Hmm.
if I look at it as an opportunity to pray for people, or hey, I could write that person a note, I could connect with them differently. I think just that perspective change really impacts so much of what we just do. And so that was something that I thought about, was really using social media not to catch up on what everybody else is saying, but to say,
Right.
how can God bring somebody to mind that maybe I hadn't thought about in a while or hadn't had an opportunity to pray for, and is there another step that I could take, towards that? Even a quick text or even Facebook Messenger of, hey, I've missed seeing you, and, came
Right.
across one of your posts or whatever it was. So I thought about those things. I think too that this ties so much with what we've almost talked about all year long in terms of having spiritual vision
Right.
and really taking that opportunity to say, okay, God, what is it that you want to do in me? And then how do I share that with others? So maybe it is really considering, like, I know that I've been talking about a group, but listening to Darius, like a lot of that clicked. So I'm
Yeah.
going to look to a group this fall. I'm going to make time for it. Or it is that intentional reading of scripture, or some of those things that can even lead us to just have the perspective change, allow that to work in some of those places. So those are some of the things that I was thinking about. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Like I think a couple things that questions I've um, been thinking about are like in those mundane situations, how can I connect to other people, and then how can I connect to God? So like if I'm
Mm,
going into a store or I'm going through a drive-through or whatever, like is there an opportunity to connect with that person? And like I think Andy said, it could be as simple as like, hey, how's your day going? Pray, can I pray for you for anything? Which, like
yeah,
you said, that's takes courage too, like to
it
say that.
does.
Like they're like, oh,
Yep.
weirdo or whatever. And I think the other thing is like the opportunities to connect with God in the mundane. Like if it's doing the dishes or folding the laundry or mowing the grass, like those are all opportunities to slow down and to pray and just to
Hmm.
connect with God in those. And then also like I think another thing for me, sometimes doing the chores can be mundane, but if I invite my daughters to participate with me,
Mm,
just gives opportunity for some meaningful conversation as well. So I think all those things are opportunities to ask in the mundane, how can I connect with God? How can I connect with those around me? And then ultimately point others to God, point
hmm.
them to Him. So I think those are
Yeah.
great. So, well, thanks for talking through that. I mean, I think that was a great talk this weekend. It was fun to kind of talk about those principles.
Hmm.
We had fun joking about before this, the mundane, like today is probably a little greater than it was a year ago pre COVID-19,
Yes.
but it's not as bad as it was like 200 years ago or 2000 years ago, like the time of Esther. I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah,
we're
so such different times, and again, that's where I think, sometimes we have to just remember that we tend to look back on those times, and I'm sure there were, I mean, there's always trade-offs, kind of
not,
thing. Um, but especially someone in Esther's role, that there was a lot of the days that would have been the same. The same things would have been required of her, the same people would have been around her. She was very isolated, all of those things. And to think
right,
that she she had a time, and really in many ways, whether she was prepared for it or not, it was for a time such as this. And I think we're all in a season like that. Who would have ever thought we would have been living in the time that we are? And so I just keep going back to, like, what can I do today? There's so many things that have just been good reminders of how much is way outside of what I can influence, but there's still a lot of things that we can too, and that we can step
right,
into with that eternal perspective. So what a great reminder.
for sure. Great. Coming up in the next few weekends, what are some things that we're looking forward to here at Cedar Creek?
Yeah, so we are planning on a reopen weekend happening August 8th and 9th. And so, really, the dream team has started to get together, going through trainings, working through sort of what this looks like in our current and present day situation. So, we're so grateful for our dream team. And, for those who are not comfortable serving or have not been able to step back in yet, there are just having them pray, still being on mission. I see them sharing and inviting on social. It's just such a big part of who we are. And so really, we're hoping that August 8th and 9th will be a day that we are able to open our doors again. And the other thing is that if you have not been baptized, we
Right.
have a way now for you to go through baptism. And so you can go to cedarcreek.tv/baptism. There are some kind of quick guidelines that are included on that webpage, but you can sign up there. Our campus staff will follow up with you and just kind of walk you through some of the specifics. But we had 7 people who have taken us up on that so far, and the campuses get to choose their dates. So, but I am huge celebrating for those 7 people that took that step. And I know that we're going to see that number continue to increase, but
Right.
I love how even not this past weekend, but 2 weekends ago, it's like God's still at work. Like
Yes. Yeah.
COVID has not set him in a spot that he is not aware of or surprised by. And so if we get to play a role in you declaring your faith publicly, we would love to be able to do that. And you've got some great options in there to keep it safe and comfortable for everybody. So if you haven't gotten baptized, now is
Yes.
definitely time
Now's
to
the,
do
yeah.
it. Campuses
Yeah.
are even maybe baptizing outside if the
Outside.
weather
Right.
holds. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. So
yeah,
that has been super exciting to see baptisms continue. And like you said, God is still at work and people's lives are being changed
yes,
and people are being connected to him and his adventure that he has for them. So that's been awesome to see. It's going to be great to see more of those coming. This coming weekend, campus pastor from White House, Sean Bellner, is going to be speaking.
yay!
I believe that's his first
I
full
believe it
message on
is.
stage. So
Yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun. So if you know him or you don't, connect with him on social media and just, encourage him.
Hmm.
And then Sarah Booker is up the week after that. And then we start a series called Where's Norm. So you'll be hearing more about Where's Norm, but that'll be a fun series as well. So
I love it.
yeah. So just thank you so much for listening and being part of the Living Out podcast. We hope that you guys have a great week. We'll be praying for you.